Here's a business looking for a customer. Here's a customer looking for a business. And that's where the Better Business Bureau comes in. The BBB connects people with businesses they can trust. That's why 80% of people choose BBB accredited businesses over non-accredited ones with the same A+ letter rating. Live happily, better after. Always look for the sign of a better business because it's looking out for you. And find a better business anytime at bbb.org.
Right. So thank you guys for joining us for our webinar this October. Today it is Safeguard What You've Built, Cybersecurity Essentials for Business Owners. This is being presented by Rick Myers, who is owner and Vice Chief Information Security Officer, Caldera Cybersecurity Services. He is also one of our board members and part of the Cybersecurity Committee. We're really grateful that he is taking time out of his day and schedule to do this for us. And with that, I'll go ahead and introduce you to Rick.
Oh, well, thanks, Austin. And by the way, Austin's going to be my assistant today. So if anybody has any questions while I'm talking, don't hesitate to raise your hand, put it in the question section. Austin can interrupt me, or we can hold it to the end, whatever you'd like. But I just want to make sure that I'm answering everybody's questions. So as Austin mentioned, this is Safeguard What You Built. What's important about this title is that we all have businesses of some sort. If we're not working for somebody, that is a business that we need to protect. If it's our own business and we've worked for years to make sure that we're servicing our customers and we have a good reputation in the community, it can go just like that. If we actually get compromised in some way, we can lose our reputation. You can have, basically compromised data. You can also, be impacted by, lawsuits if necessary, if they find negligence on your part. So safeguarding what we've built over these years is what's important about this presentation. So I'm going to go through several slides. Again, ask questions as they come up. I want to make sure that, we are answering everybody's concerns and we're getting this to be very fruitful for everybody. So, Austin, if you can go to the next slide, appreciate it. Okay, this is about who I am. So it's got a couple bullets here. One is, I'm a certified information system security professional. Is really fancy for. I have a CISSP. It's a certification issued by the ISC Squared organization. It shows that I have knowledge over operations, security management, and so forth. I got that several years ago. I also have a certification in PCI. So that's my other acronym. PCIP means I'm a PCI professional. I was an ISA at a company I was at recently, but being a PCI professional means I understand credit card, security and protecting, card data for my clients. Second thing is I've been 30 years in the IT operations, 10 years plus in cybersecurity. It really became necessary for me to bring on cybersecurity knowledge into my repertoire, to my resume, because it's necessary. You not only have to support the servers and desktops and software and everything in the business, but you have to make sure they're safe and protecting the data that we house. Third thing, and this is one of the most important things I mentioned to everybody, is that I have a passion for community education. You'll find me speaking at multiple organizations. I'm very boisterous about protecting small businesses in our community because they're the bread and butter, the heart and soul of our economic, ecosystem that we have. And so I want to make sure that even the smallest companies have the ability to benefit from cybersecurity education, understanding how to protect or basically safeguard what we've built, right? And then finally, I'm a full-time cybersecurity consultant. Austin mentioned that was a VCISO. It's actually a fractional CISO. VCISO, same thing. It just means I have multiple clients where I provide chief information security operations support for them. And I'm the owner of Caldera Cybersecurity Services here in Albuquerque, a proud resident of New Mexico for the past 8 months. I'm very happy to be here and I'm very happy to work with the community that we've built. All right, Austin. All right, so why does cybersecurity matter for small businesses? I put up here a couple of statistics. I'm not going to go into great detail on all of them, but I'm going to point out that 43% of all cybersecurity attacks target small businesses. And if you think about it, why? Because your customers may be larger companies that you're doing services for. I usually bring a story to the table where you have a lawn care company who cuts the grass and maintains the landscaping around a company's business. Well, if they got hacked and their email got compromised, then they could be sending data or malicious emails over to their larger customers. So they become a big target. The other thing too is that small businesses, even like myself, we don't have really deep pockets where a large company might be spending $1 to $2 million per year for their cybersecurity program. Well, what do we do on a small side? We might have a couple of $100, maybe $1,000 that we have in our budget for this. So we have to consider that the bad guys know that, and they know that we might be vulnerable. So they're looking for a way into our company as well as to any of our customers. The other thing too is from a reporting perspective, 94% of all small, medium-sized businesses reported at least one cyber attack in recent years. And if you're the lucky 6% that's had nothing ever happen, nobody ever, sending you a text message asking you to, send them money, or an email phishing attack or anything like that, then you're very, very lucky. But 94% of us, do experience these, sometimes on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and you have to have your defenses up to protect yourself against those. And so what are small businesses saying out there? 60% of them are reporting that cybersecurity is a top concern. But as you're a small company, you may have other concerns like, how am I covering payroll? What am I doing for marketing? How do I service my customers? What's the new sale that I'm going to put on for the holiday season, so forth. So that takes up a lot of time, but you also have to consider cybersecurity. And then, from a, monetary standpoint, $16 billion in U.S. cybercrime losses reported in 2024. That's huge. $16 billion that could have gone somewhere else. Now that's in losses. Now, what about the actual defenses that were paid for as well? Could be, $500 billion that's been spent, just on defenses, and you're still losing $16 billion in revenue and data losses. And then finally, I said, 80% of ransomware victims say that they paid, but many never fully recovered. Well, okay, the FBI and the government says don't pay ransomware. That just encourages the malicious actor to, basically, go to the next place or continue asking you for money, coming back. As I've heard about that before, you get a ransomware, you pay it. Guess what? They come back again, right? And they may ask you for more money, right? So you really don't want to encourage that repeat, cycle over and over again by, don't pay the ransomware. But I understand if you're completely shut down with ransomware because everything's been encrypted, what are you going to do, right? So it's a really tough decision to make. Okay, Austin, next slide. All right, some local business community crime statistics. I did a search for New Mexico, and the data I could pull back was from 22 and 23. 1,900 small businesses, reported these attacks, or 1,900 small businesses cyber attacks occurred. 28% of the reported data breaches involved small businesses, and then $31 million lost in that cybercrime. Some of the companies you may recognize, some of the ones I pulled was True Health of New Mexico had a data breach. The breach affected more than 62,000 individuals. The company issued breach notices to those affected, and that's the notification goes out. They may offer you credit, monitoring, and some good, advice on how to protect yourself. But that doesn't really help it when the data goes out the door. Another incident in 2024 was the New Mexico Public Defender's Office had a cyber breach. That was on June 27th. The breach impacted their systems, and there was a leak of private data. So if you can imagine, you're a public defender, and perhaps your files, your evidence, things like that for your clients may be leaked out into the open. That's not a good thing. So the way a lot of these ransomware crimes go down is that somebody will contact you. They will say, hey, we've gained access to your data. They may give you a little sample of that data, and they'll say, well, if you don't want us to release it to the internet, put it out in the public, well, pay us a couple $1 million. Okay, you fight with that. You might negotiate it down, get it down to $500,000 or whatever you can negotiate. And then as they leave, they may actually do a ransomware on you. They may encrypt all of that data. for you on your system, and then the next guys come in and say, hey, well, we encrypted your data, now you got to pay us more money. So it gets really insidious very quickly when you get involved in this ransomware and people impacting your data systems. If you can think about it, how long could you be without your computer systems or your electronic records? How long can you be down before it really starts impacting your business? Okay, next slide, please. So top 5 cyber threats facing small businesses. You'll hear about phishing and the ransomware, business email compromise. I'm going to go through each one of those with a slide and give you some background on that. But really, phishing is number one. What phishing does, it either sends you an email, so you can have a phishing attack. You can have a vishing attack, which is over a voice, where someone calls you up and tries to social engineer you. You have smishing attacks or SMS messages come across your text messaging. Quishing, which is QR codes, could be affected out there. You remember during COVID, a lot of restaurants went to QR codes for their menus. Thought it was great. Well, someone could come and put a sticker right over the top of that sticker that's at the restaurant and redirect you to a malicious website and affect your phone or whatever system you're using to access that QR code. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Ransomware and extortion I've talked about, but in general, these attacks are really like run as a business. So if you ever read about one of the ransomware gangs, they run it as a business. One company may, or I call it a company, but one malicious gang may actually go in and do the reconnaissance work. They go in and break into your network. They look around for your data. They don't take anything, but they learn where your data is at. And they learn about how to get into your network. And they go, okay, got it. I'm going to sell it to the next guy. The next guy will come in and he wants to do extortion. So he's going to use that information that he just got from the ransomware, or the reconnaissance, actor, and he gets into your network. He knows exactly where your data is at. He pulls it out probably within minutes. And then he starts sending you emails about, hey, I got your data. Here's a sample. Remember the whole story? Got the data. I'm going to release it. Got to give me money. Okay. You hire someone to help you with the negotiations. You get it down to half price, so forth, right? And then he takes that information that he used to get into your network and he sells it off to a ransomware gang. And that ransomware gang comes in and they encrypt all your data. And then they send you an email and say, hey, we want to get some more money to unencrypt your data. So it's very insidious. And the companies who write this software, this ransomware software, actually have customer support. They have marketing. They're all in this dark web, as you've probably heard about, the dark web. They're advertising these services and they're saying, hey, you can get this package. It's all like an old kit. You can send out your own ransomware attacks. Okay, all completely illegal, but I just want to kind of give you a feel for the business nature of this piece. I would even mention too, from a customer service perspective, they have people who can help you in negotiation with your victims. So if somebody's saying, I'm not paying you, well, they have ways of increasing the pressure on companies, and they do that, consultation with their clients. Really, really insidious. I encourage you to look and read about ransomware and extortion. Then we got business email compromise. We'll go through a little bit more of that detail in a second. I just want to mention that one. And then I've added an artificial intelligence attacks. I think we've all heard over the last couple of years. I mean, probably I think it's going into the third year where we first started hearing about ChatGPT. Now, artificial intelligence experts will tell you, well, artificial intelligence has been around for a long time. It didn't really hit the mainstream until we started seeing on the news ChatGPT and the wonderful things it can do. It became Google on steroids, where it can go and pull data for you and have almost a human-like conversation with you. That's wonderful. Well, like with any new technology, the bad guys get a hold of it and they try to figure out how to exploit that new technology for their own purposes. And artificial intelligence-based attacks are on the rise. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail in a second. Okay. And then, of course, we got insider threat, human error. This is where things occur within your own company that may be malicious or non-malicious, and we'll talk about those differences. But insider threats could be the ones who open the door for somebody to come in and take your data. Okay. Maybe they're using a password that they've used in 30 other websites, and that 30th website gets compromised. Now somebody tries to use that same password on your site, okay, and get into your data using that password. So we'll talk about that and some of the things that you can do to help with that. Okay. All right, let's move on. We're going to talk about phishing now, a little bit more detail. One of the things I wanted to educate you on is, why is phishing so prevalent and so widely used by the malicious actor? Well, first of all, we all think we're very logical and we follow the rules and we're very meticulous about what we do. Well, the malicious actor sending you a phishing email is trying to switch your brain from the logic mode into an emotional state to where you start reacting on what we call the reptilian complex you see in the slide. The reptilian complex, or the reptilian brain, has been with us for millions of years, ever since we were little amoebas, we came along and our brains started forming. That reptilian brain is the fight or flight reflex that we all have. If you see something happening in your house, or you touch, something's on fire, well, you're going to take an immediate action, and it's almost unthought. It's basically on automatic. If you see a snake, you're going to jump back. If you see a spider, you may jump back. Those are all fight or flight type of responses. And because it's in the fight or flight, or the reptilian brain, you're not actually going through your logical cortex, the prefrontal cortex of your brain. If you look at the very front, that's where logic occurs. That's where you kind of separate fantasy from fact, and you take the time to analyze what's going on, right? By them sending you, for example, an email, and it's been addressed as coming from your boss, well, that first thing does, it kind of tears down your protections, going, oh my gosh, my boss. Well, that emotional, stress starts raising, going, okay, what did I do, right? And then they would add in, a call to action, something you have to do, and it's going to be late, and there's going to be consequences. So that is to move you from that logical prefrontal cortex mode into reptilian mode. Oh, how do I survive this? How do I get my boss happy? How do I make sure I get my paycheck? How do I make sure we don't miss a huge purchase order that we had to get out today? They're trying to put you into that rush mode. Why? To put you in reptilian mode. Okay. So if you slow down and always think about somebody coming at you with an email and treat each one as a potential phishing campaign, then you're going to look for some warning signs. And these warning signs, there's 6 of them on the screen, and some of them are easy to see and some aren't. But if you see that an email address is from somebody you don't recognize, well, that's a flag. You don't recognize this person. Why is he asking you about this? Maybe it's an email that's coming from HR, and well, you don't have an HR department. You are the HR department. Why are you sending that out? So that's a spoofed email. Generic greetings may come at you, like, hi there to all employees. They don't know who you are. They're just sending this email out to thousands and thousands of people, hoping somebody was going to fall for it. So they don't want to name, say, Dear John. It's going to lower their hit rate. So they're going to put something generic in there. You also look for that sense of urgency, that threatening language. If you don't do this, you're not going to get that sort of thing. You have until 5 o'clock. It's trying to put you into that sense of urgency. Why? They're trying to get you into that reptilian survival mode. Phishing emails usually want you to go do something, not necessarily just kind of tell you to go do something, but they'll give you some convenience, like a link or an attachment. You better open this attachment and read it, because it's got important information in there. So it's a call to action, says it's important, and that attachment contains malicious content, and that can infect your machine. The next one here is poor grammar. Well, I almost say forget that one, because tying back into AI, there is a lot of people who don't speak English on a native level. So when they wrote phishing emails before, it'd be a lot of broken English or wrong diction, things like that. It could be easily recognized, going, hey, that was written by a non-English speaker. Well, with the advent of AI now AI can write pretty dang good emails that can even be wrapped around human idioms, right? So those human type of conversations that you read in an email can be reproduced by AI. And so the days of poor grammar, I say there's very few and far between. So not so much as a warning level now, but if you see poor grammar, definitely it's a threat. And then of course, they're trying to get you to do something, reveal something, for them, for their benefit. So it's usually a request for personal or financial information, like, hey, we just want to confirm the bank account that you use. Can you give us the routing number and the account number? Can you give us your social security number? Okay, they can get very silly, but hey, they're phishing, thousands of people, and then somebody might fall for it. So, what do they have to lose? Cost of an email, right? All right. So let's move to the next slide, please. Okay. Now this one you can take, and it's actually a resource that Austin can make sure you can get. But this 7-second security check rule is a great resource. You can turn this into a palm card. You can make it something you put on your employee bulletin board. You can have them tape it to their monitor. But as I was saying, the phishing bad guy wants you to get into that reptilian mode, and he wants you to go fast. He doesn't want you to think. He wants you just to go to his action. Well, this rule that I've set up here is a 7-second security check. So if you took every email that came in front of you and took 7 seconds, and you look for those red flags that I just talked about, you can actually stop a lot of phishing attacks dead in their tracks. So the 7 seconds is the 7 warning signs, red flags, threatening language, request for you to act, generic reading, it wasn't expected, contains grammar errors, suspicious attachments or links, and designed poorly. Okay, well, maybe actually, the 7 and the 5 and 7 steps, maybe going away with AI. So I was trying to get to. So, but again, you're welcome to use this when your own business. Print it out, give it to your employees, make it a wallet card if you need to. That's a great resource. Okay, Austin, next.
Oh, great. And then we just had one question come in, and then it was, if you could change one misconception business leaders have about cybersecurity, what would it be?
One misconception is that I would say if you just buy tools and you install them, like for example, you just do an investment in Microsoft Defender and you load it on all the machines, are you safe? Well, you're safer. You are, right? But you're not safe. So don't assume this is a one-dimensional, cure-all type of effect. This is multi-pronged. So, and it's going to include not only your security tool sets and your surveillance abilities, but also the controls that you have in place, where you tell people that, for example, one control might be don't use your company email out in websites like Spotify. Why would you use your company email to register for Spotify? Don't need to, unless there's a business requirement to do that. And the other thing to be concerned about is just the human nature, the cybersecurity culture that you have within your company. It's everybody's job to protect your data. So, but I would change that. Not one thing is going to make you safe. It will make you safer. Okay, good question. All right, next slide, the business email scam. The BEC, this is where, for example, you have Office 365 and somebody compromises your security, gets access to your email. Well, all right, well, it affects you because they have access probably to all of your email, things that you have in there from your business. Maybe it's customer contact information. Maybe it's some old emails that gave customers your account numbers, or you got their account numbers, whatever. That's full, that's out there. But also lots of BEC, business email compromise, occurs when the malicious actor gains access, but he starts sending mail on your behalf. They'll look at your contacts and you go, oh wow, they'll trust Rick. Let's compromise his email, and we'll send emails from Rick to all of his customers, and we'll include this attachment that will ask them to, very importantly, very quickly, to open up so that they can confirm this month's invoice, right? So now they're using your email address, your domain, to spread that malicious software out there, asking people to go do things, and they're using your guys and your reputation to facilitate that. So it's huge. A lot of people are getting compromised on email because phishing is so important, and people know, well, I'm not going to read stuff they don't know who it is, but if it comes from Rick, I'll probably go into that reptilian mode and go, okay, yeah, Rick is sending me something. It's always very important. Let me open it up. Okay. So we want to make sure that from an email protection perspective, we're locking our email. We're putting MFA on it. If you don't know what MFA is, it's multi-factor authentication. That's where it sends a code to your phone. They call you on the phone. They send you an email MFA code, or you use your Google Authenticator app or your Microsoft app Those are all MFA. Those are things that are in your hands, things that are under your control. So if somebody compromises your account name, like your email address and your password, they can't get into your account without that MFA credential. So that's very, very important to lock that down. The other thing too is email compromise. One of the attacks that are out there is that companies get very busy. Big companies get very, very busy. They may have an invoices email, places where invoices come in to be paid. So it goes to their accounts payable section. Well, they open it up and happens to be an email from Rick, and Rick sent an invoice for $1,000. And by the way, on that invoice, it tells them where to pay, which is another routing number, a bank account, maybe it's a wiring information. And if they're not careful, that company will just process it, right? And send the information, send the money out to that new location. That's where verification becomes extremely important. If somebody's sending you or wants money, if they're sending you something like that, then pick up the phone and call your contact using the phone number that you have in your contacts list, not what's on the printed invoice, because that could be a scam as well. They could be pointing you to a call center that's waiting for your call. And you want to make sure you're calling the person at that company to confirm it. So always do a verification if it's involving money or something really critical. Be careful about using chat even, because you don't know who's on the other side. Have a voice that you can recognize. But some people might argue, well, AI can copy voices. Well, yes, but that's lower risk, I think. But at least you're making a call to a known phone number. Okay. And then lastly on BEC, this can impact your customers with those emails. You could get your lost reputation from this. So customers won't trust you. I know when I've encountered them, I immediately block the entire domain. They cannot send email to my client's account until we understand what happened, what they do about it, and why are they not going to have it happen again. So we look at them as very high risk at that point. And you can also face possible legal and compliance exposure. And when I say exposure, it might be money. Because if you're negligent and you do something to affect somebody's going to be looking to you for reparations. So you want to be very careful here. Okay. All right. Next slide. Okay. We talked a lot about ransomware already. I kind of put that in, but how do you avoid that ransomware, that software that goes in and starts encrypting your data and making your life miserable from that moment on? Well, a couple of things you can do is keep your systems and software up to date. New ransomware attacks are being noted every day by the software vendors like the Microsoft or those who write Linux or any of the big products that you might have in your company. Make sure you're following their instructions about updating their software. And believe me, like Microsoft, they just had a huge ton of products and patches. They call it Patch Tuesday. So once a month on a Tuesday, all their patches get released. And there was 708 patches that got applied just at one client of mine, just for 1 month. 708 patches were applied. So huge. The other thing you can do is make sure you have a backup. And backups need to be, where you have 3 copies of that backup. 2 of them are stored locally, maybe not on the machine that you're backing up, but on another device, and 1 offsite or in the cloud. And this is because when you get the ransomware and the software starts encrypting all of your data, well, guess what? It's going to probably going to encrypt your backups too. And they can get pretty insidious, and they can go in and actually delete your backups so that you don't have anywhere to go to other than to them to unencrypt your data. So you want to make sure that you have multiple copies of your backups in a safe location. And they actually call it immutable backups, meaning not even you can delete them. So some services provide you that, where once you put a backup into their system, you can't get it out. It takes literally an act of multiple administrators to remove that data. But that's why they're called immutable. You will sometimes see that on insurance policy questionnaires. It's like, are you backing up your data and is it immutable? Well, that's where you need to make sure that you have something off-site. Okay. And then the other thing that's very important is deploying some sort of anti-malware software on all your devices, including mobile phones. And this is like your Defenders. Make sure that's up and running. Defender's not too bad these days. I've seen companies rely on Defender quite a bit, but you have CrowdStrike, SentinelOne. These are all big products that you've probably seen commercials on, read them in the news. These are all good products, but they do come at a cost, but they do protect you from a lot of ransomware attack vectors. And that is what's important about this. Okay. All right.
Oh,
Next.
great. Oh,
Okay.
sorry. Just a
Okay.
quick, yeah, we got another question. How do you build a culture where employees feel safe reporting suspicious emails, even if they've clicked on something by mistake?
Oh, that's my philosophy is, we'll talk about training and awareness training. And part of that training is to encourage people to report. If you see something, say something, see something, report something, and never take a bat to somebody. If they report something to you and it turns out to be a false alarm, congratulate that person for reporting it to you, and then coach them on what you found and why it wasn't, and why, if you need to coach them to be a little bit more diligent on their solution or in their sense, but never, 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 basically punish somebody for reporting something because it's a lead. They don't know. They're reporting it to IT security or operations, engineering, whatever you want to call it in your company, but they're reporting it to IT. And so you should follow up on everything as if it was real and prove it's not real. And that might take a few minutes. It might take a half a day, but that is going to keep them from becoming leery about reporting it. There are some systems out there like KnowBe4, for example. It's a company based in Tampa, actually, and they do cybersecurity awareness training. And part of what they provide you is some technology to embed right in Outlook a little phishing button. So if you see something you suspect is phishing, you click that button, it takes that email out of your inbox and then sends a copy over to your IT department for further analysis. And so the IT team can return it back to you going out, we didn't find anything wrong with it, or thank you, we saw something and absolutely kudos to you for finding it. Okay. Austin, you think they answered the question? Don't beat on people. Congratulations. Okay. All right. Next slide. We're going to talk about artificial intelligence next. All right. And we talked a little bit about it. Okay. But like I said, artificial intelligence is being used now by malicious actors, and a lot of them are foreign state. They don't speak English necessarily very well, but they're using artificial intelligence to craft their phishing campaigns and other campaigns to convince you that it's a locally generated document for some reason. So what can you do to help defend against that these days? One is, we talked about cybersecurity awareness training, like through a product like KnowBe4. And KnowBe4 is a good product. I've used it for years, and it does have modules now because they're recognizing that AI is coming to the forefront of being the attack vector. So train your staff to look for AI enhanced phishing, and that might mean that it's the generic greeting goes away. Now they're using the person's name. It's a little bit more of a spear phishing attack. Spear phishing being where it's very directed to an individual, has some personal information in it, again, to take their defenses down, say, oh, well, nobody would know that, my dog's name is Sam. Well, unless, of course, you put it on Facebook all the time and it's in the public, and someone, grab that out and put that in a database and says, hey, I'm going to send this over, and say, hey, your dog's name's Sam. So anyway, but have them look for these AI enhanced phishing campaigns, go through that training, look for things that are, very, personal, and just, again, you fall for you basically look for those other red flags, like, is this expected? Is this person talking like they normally talk? Would my boss, ask me this? It seems really out of character. And that is something you can look for. Deploying, the second thing would be deploying advanced email and threat detection. A lot of companies use Microsoft 365 or Google. They all claim to have their own little spam, engines looking for, phishing campaigns, looking for keywords, looking for things that they can block this email from you. But advanced email security will give you more insight in terms of why that email was flagged, and may even actually do better job than Microsoft or Google to look for email. It checks for a lot of things on the network. It looks for, anomalies within the content. It might look for anomalies that, hey, you don't normally get email from this person this often or asking this type of question. You might want to be very careful. Okay, so that you'll find in the advanced products. Avanan is one that I like a lot. It's a product by Checkpoint. It's really easy to deploy. There's a few. Mimecast has one. We'll go through those in a future slide. I'll give you some examples. All right, and then of course I've already talked about verifying the identity of the person beyond that email. Like, if you don't understand what they're asking for, don't reply back to that email. Call them up. okay? And be careful of if it points you to a chat window or gives you a phone number that you call. Nope. Look in your contact list, use your own facilities to make that communication, and then confirm that you trust this email communication. All right. Of course, protecting your company voice, video, and branding. What this means is in the advent of AI, now you can have AI listen to somebody speaking, and it varies, probably 30 seconds to a minute of voice from somebody. The AI can imitate it. Maybe not perfectly, might take a little bit more training, but they're getting to the point where people cannot recognize it if they're not specifically listening for telltale signs of voice being generated by AI. Video as well. If you just have a few pictures of somebody from different point of views, right, left, center, back, ahead, things like that, AI can generate a pretty convincing video of that person to convince you that you're talking to your boss or talking to somebody else of importance. A good story here I'll tell you is that I think it was in South Korea. There was a financial firm. There was a guy who was in charge of doing transfers for his company. And you may have read about this a couple of years ago, but he was in charge of doing transfers. So he got an email or a text, however, it was a text-based communication from supposedly his CFO saying, could you please transfer $20 million to so-and-so? Well, being a good employee trained on cybersecurity awareness, says, oh, no, I'm not going to just take the email as a authorization. I'm going to call this person. Well, at the same time, there was a call coming in on his video chat, and it was from the CFO. And when he opened up the video, it was a boardroom, and it had a bunch of people in it, and they were all live. They were milling around talking, and the CFO was there. And the CFO said, I'm here to confirm the $20 million transfer so that you don't worry that you don't have authorization. So that was enough to convince the transfer gentleman to send $20 million to this, maybe it was a Swiss account, but he sent the $20 million. Then they determined after he sent it, everything was fake. The text message, the video, the meeting, the live back and forth chat was all being done through AI. They got $20 million, probably for a couple of days worth of work to set everything up. But this is how insidious AI can be, right? And the last component I'll talk about is branding. Branding is very important to everybody's small business. Your logo, your website, these all build up reputation of being a legitimate business and an identification of your company online. Okay. If you don't protect your branding, meaning looking for spoofed domains out there where people will just change one letter of your domain or add something in front of your domain. If your company was acme.com, maybe it would be shopacme.com, and they go in there, register that domain, and they start sending emails out or advertising that website to your customers. All of a sudden, your customers may get confused and go to their site, or worse yet, when they go to pay a bill, they go to shopacme.com and pay the bill to them, and the bad guy gets the money. He's gone within a week, and so is your money. So protecting yourself, looking for typo squatted, so it's called. It's when they change a few letters or add something to your domain name. You need to be aware of that. There are some companies that will help you do that and search for any newly registered domains to see if they match your domain branding. So that company is called ZeroFox. I've used them for several years. They're really good. They will track down, they will notify you, and they have a takedown team that will communicate with the network and hosting operators out there to get that site taken down. And if you need to, they will help you take over that domain to make sure that no one else typo squats on it again. So that's branding. And the last two is use AI defensively, meaning buy tools and tool sets that use AI to look for anomalous behavior within your staff, your email, things like that. So AI can be trained to look for what's normal, and it will tell you if it's finding patterns of data that you might want to look at. So AI is being used for that user behavior analysis, and it's getting better and better at that. And then lastly, stay informed. Read. There are plenty of podcasts, news articles that you can look at to stay informed of what's coming up and what's at the forefront of news, especially around AI. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next slide. All right. The insider threat. Here I'll start out with some definitions of what an insider looks like within your company. And these are people who've made, created some sort of cybersecurity risk for you. You have three types. You have the malicious insider, and that's your disgruntled employee, contractor who intentionally want to cause you harm. You have the negligent insider. They're the ones who are well-meaning. They've been with you for a long time, or maybe new, but they fall for phishing or they mishandle data. Oh, that policy about encrypting the PII data I have on my external hard disk. I don't need to do that. I'm never going to lose that, right? That's negligent insider. And then you have the compromised insider, and those are the employees who accounts have been hijacked by attackers. They've been compromised, and that could lead to your business email compromise. So, what do you do about that? How do you protect yourself from your own employees or people who are coming into your business? The first of all is to admit knowing what they look like, knowing the three types that I just mentioned. The other thing is limit the access that they have to your company data and maybe even physical facilities down to what's necessary. Giving someone a master key, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't give everybody a master key to your building because it just isn't necessary, and that creates a risk. So why would you give them admin credentials on their desktop computers or some system like website or anything like that? Only if it's in their job description and they've been trained and they understand what they're doing with it and they understand how to protect that credential, whether it's a key or a password. Make sure they know what they're doing with it, and that it's limited to only when they're needed. Implement strong identity and access controls. Just means make sure you have passwords that like with Microsoft, you can force a change of a password every 30, 60, 90 year level change. I'll talk about that a little bit. Is that passwords, they're going to password lists, which means that you have something like a passport or a phone that you basically click when you're trying to log in. You click something on the phone, or there's a security key plugged into your desktop computer that lets you in. It acts like an MFA. But until we get there, we still need to follow the whole username, password, MFA rule set. So passwords, my philosophy is, I know Microsoft said you don't ever need to change a password. I think that gets a little risky. Then some people were saying, well, every 12 months, okay, well, at least you're changing it. But what I've adopted is a 6-month change policy. So every 6 months, you change your password. So that does not interfere with somebody's, trying to memorize a good passphrase. And if you're making them change it every 30 days, they're going to end up forgetting their password, or they're going to make it a lot simpler than they need to. But at 6 months, they have time to memorize it and get used to it, and they're good. And then they just know they need to change it. I change my password again for some clients every 6 months, and I just make it a good passphrase, and I memorize it, and I'm good for 6 months. I'm I'm good. The next one is, one other thing I wanted to mention is shared passwords. No, nobody shares passwords. You should avoid those like the plague. Everybody has their own user ID and their own password, and you never use the default password that might come in a piece of software or a piece of equipment that you install on your network. Always change the default passwords to something that's complex, like we just talked about. And complexity could be as simple as has to be 14 or 15 characters or longer. Passphrases are great for that. You can use 3 to 4 words and memorable words, and that becomes your passphrase, and it meets the 15 character rule set. Okay. Let me move on to unusual behavior, monitoring for unusual behavior. That is where you're looking for brute force attempts, where someone is trying to brute force into an account. That might mean at 10 password failures, you're going to lock their account. And these are configurations that are in Microsoft. You can set it to say lock the account after 10 and don't unlock it at all, or unlock it after 30 minutes. Okay, that slows down the bad guy who's trying to just run through a whole bunch of passwords trying to find a hit. So it slows them down. The longer the freeze out period, the better. But that becomes an inconvenience for people too, because maybe it's middle of the night. They don't want to have to wake up somebody to get them reset. So you look for those, telltale signs of compromise. A brute force attack, maybe suspicious data transfers, maybe it's a USB was plugged into a desktop. You want to check on that. And then mass email forwarding as well is if they're sending a whole bunch of emails all of a sudden and it's not their job, then you would want to check on that. Okay. The other thing is to create a good, strong security culture, raising everybody's awareness and making sure everybody understands that it's everybody's job to be security aware and to make sure that they're protecting the company's data. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the last few slides here as we're running up to an hour here. So simple steps, big protection can come up here, these 6 items. Number 1, if you don't have MFA turned on, you need to go to your bank, go to your email provider. Every software product you log into, make sure you have MFA turned on. Number 1, I've seen so many companies compromised, and when I asked them what was happening, they said, well, we never knew about this thing called MFA, and so we turned that on, and so they're, much more protected now. And use those long, unique passwords. Regular updates is the second thing. Make sure your PCs are pulling down updates from Microsoft. You can turn those on automatic, and you don't have to worry about them until something goes wrong, but that's rare. But make sure regular updates are being applied to all your software that you're using, including your desktops and servers. Make sure you have your backups. We talked about those. Train your team is also, I would say that's number 2. Because if you have MFA turned on and they, aren't using it, or have got it turned off, then they need to understand what that means. So teach them to spot those phishings and the scams, and use that second rule. Finally, have a plan. So if something does happen, it's better to have talked it through. Even if you're a one-man shop, talk it through with yourself and write it down of what you need to do. Maybe it's a list of your major customers. Maybe it's a list of your insurance companies. Maybe it's a list of security professionals that you have on call, just to tell them what happened and get their advice. Have a plan written down, because when you are under attack, you're in that reptilian brain, fight or flight, and you may not think through all these things, but put it on paper. You'll find it's a great help. And then, of course, always protect your sensitive data, limit the access, encrypt it where you can. These are the building blocks of a solid security program or foundation, is to make sure that your sensitive data is protected, because that is your business, right? Okay, and let's go to the next one. We'll move through these pretty good. Tools you can use today. Okay, I mentioned a few of them, but from an endpoint security perspective, we talked about Microsoft Defender. There's also Blackpoint, blackpoint.com, great product. They even have people who will monitor your endpoints for you 24/7. And they can actually contain a device, meaning take it off the network, lock it up if they see something suspicious going on. So Blackpoint, SentinelOne, and CrowdStrike are 2 of the premier products for providing endpoint protection. I use both. They're great. I don't use them both at the same time, but I've used SentinelOne and CrowdStrike. Choose one, see if that matches your budget. But if not, Microsoft Defender is always a good product. Okay. Password managers, we didn't talk too much about, but I talked about long, complex passwords or password phrases. Well, the other rule is always use a different password for every site you have. Okay. So never reuse a password out there. So what that generates is hundreds of passwords. They're all unique. Well, password managers basically store them for you. You have one very good master password that opens up the vault, and then you can go in and say which site that I'm going to, and it will have stored in there the credentials for that site. So that way you can fulfill the new password for every site or every system that you're logging into. Some options for you: Bitwarden, 1Password, or LastPass. Those are kind of in descending order for me. I use Bitwarden, I've used 1Pass, and also have LastPass as well. The last ones are MFA apps. You've got Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator, so forth. If you have a system that they're sending MFA codes, like a bank might send you an MFA code through mail, I avoid those, because if your email got compromised, the bad guy is going to have your MFA code, and he may know that. So always be on the watch for that. But if it's an authenticator, it's on your phone, it's in your hand. Backups, you have AFI.ai, Veeam, iDrive, so forth. Good ones to look at. Email security, I mentioned Abaddon, good product by Checkpoint. But there's also Microsoft Defender, which just comes with 365. You can turn that on, has different levels, but the initial one is pretty good. And then demarking and easy demarc, we didn't talk too much about it because we're running out of time. But from an email security perspective, always have your demarc set in your DNS. And we can talk about that, or you can call me, or I can take you through that a little bit more. But DMARC and Easy DMARC are two software products that help you look at those DNS configurations to see that you're safe. And then finally, from an awareness training perspective, I really love KnowBe4. I've seen others. I keep coming back to KnowBe4 because they have great content, great technology, and great support. So I really do love them. Can't recommend them enough. Okay, let's go to our final two slides here. When to call a professional. I'm going to stay on this for just a few minutes here. Well, I would say my first reaction to this one is, when do you need to call a professional? It's probably before you get compromised. So always have at hand somebody you can talk to, whether it's just a meet and greet, or you know a face, you know a name, you know what they do. Have that in your Rolodex. You use the old Rolodex or in your contact list. Know somebody that you can call and maybe just ask them advice. A lot of us just talk to you 15 minutes and we'll just give you free advice and tell you, here's some of the basic things you need to do, very similar to this presentation. But you need to call a professional for sure if you feel like there's something wrong in your network or you suspect some sort of breach. If you're not versed in technology and knowing what the systems look like and how to read logs, call somebody who does. If it's after a ransomware attack or a phishing attack or even during, call somebody. They will help you. There's certain things you need to do, like, hey, just disconnect the devices that are encrypted. Don't turn them off. You lose evidence on that. And then make sure you know what the protocols are for preserving evidence and retaining control or regaining control over your data. Also, when you lack a staff, I've already mentioned that. If you don't have an IT staff or a security staff, you need to have somebody there helping you. Okay, and being in charge of a security program for whatever level, size, complexity of your company, they can figure that out and help you build that out. And of course, a lot of companies now are doing cybersecurity insurance. That usually comes with a questionnaire. So call somebody if you don't already understand all the technology that is being talked about on those questionnaires. Call somebody to understand what they mean. You don't want to answer something in the positive when you don't do it, because that can become insurance fraud, or worse, in the worst cases, they just reject your claim because you said you were doing something and you weren't, but that's because you just didn't understand the question. Okay. And then finally, make sure you get regular security checkups, whether you're doing it yourself through some sort of software package, or you're having somebody come in and just doing a quick assessment, because they do multi-dimensional. They look at server configurations. They look at your controls, like, do you have MFA turned on? They look at that and they give you some, good recommendations to become safer. Okay. All right. The last slide is key takeaways. What can you do today, right? And this is why I encourage you, set up MFA in all accounts. If you don't have it today, go find out which ones you don't and start getting those set up. Next one is use your complex passwords or phrases. And Austin, do you have a question? Or
go ahead and finish.
Okay. All right. Great. So use complex passwords or passphrases. Train your staff to recognize those phishing emails. Subscribe to an endpoint security product, i.e. like Windows Defender. And then lastly, and maybe I talked too fast, this is kind of funny, slow down and think before you click, right? That 7-second rule, most important piece. All right, there we go. We made it through all the slides, Austin. I'm done.
We just had one last question. How can executives and C-suites model good email security behavior to influence the rest of the organization?
Say that again. How can the board?
So how can executives and C-suites model good email security behavior to influence the rest of the organization?
Oh, well, one of the simple things is, the executives should honor the verification, okay? Trust but verify rule. So if they send out a request, an email going, hey, transfer $20 million, you're going to reward that person when they just call you and say, you sent me this email. I'm verifying that you really did send this to me. You want them to respect the rules that everybody else is following to protect the data. They also follow the same rules in terms of sending PII data out. They don't do it. They follow the same controls that the regular employees are. The other thing they can do to model this is that when they meet with the employees, is they emphasize the importance of the security, controls that have been put in place, and the importance of preserving the customer's security and privacy. So just every time they meet, they talk about security.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. Answered a lot of questions that I know as soon as we hop off, I'll have plenty more.
Okay.
but you can always look forward to our webinars. We try and do them on a monthly basis with different topics throughout the year. Thank you so much, Rick, for putting on an amazing presentation about cybersecurity and protecting your business. If you have any questions or you want to reach out to Rick, his information is on the screen. Caldera Cybersecurity Services. Again, thank you so much, Rick. We look forward to the continued collaboration.
You're welcome. Thanks for hosting me today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Here's a business looking for a customer. Here's a customer looking for a business. And that's where the Better Business Bureau comes in. The BBB connects people with businesses they can trust. That's why 80% of people choose BBB accredited businesses over non-accredited ones with the same A+ letter rating. Live happily, better after. Always look for the sign of a better business because it's looking out for you. And find a better business anytime at bbb.org.